It's a really fascinating area of research. Hello and welcome to KAUST Live. We're coming to you from the Winter Enrichment Program. This year's theme is time. Now, time is one of life's most universal experiences, but how do we really know about the physics, cultural impact, the feeling of time, etc.? So here to speak to us about that, about the epigenetics of circadian rhythm, is the director of the Center for Epigenetics and Metabolism at the University of California in Irvine, Paolo Sassone-Corsi. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So maybe to set a baseline, tell us, what is circadian rhythm?
Right. So circadian, the word itself comes from Latin, and it means circadium. So rhythms of about a day. Circadium is about a day. So those are all the rhythms that are dominating our life, or life of every single life form on the planet, and are based on the 24-hour cycles. Now, why 24 hours? Why a day? Well, that's very simple. It's based on something that's been the same for the past 2-3 billion years, which is the rotation of the Earth on its own axis. So that's how the days are generated, right? By the planet turning on its own axis. Those 24-hour cycles have been there forever. And all life on this planet has evolved, adapting to those cycles, actually I will say even because of those cycles. So in our biology, in our physiology, all those circuits that are allowing us to have a normal life have been wired over billion years to be around those 24-hour cycles.
Well, and I think this gets to something that I found absolutely fascinating. You are a co-author of a book, Circadian Rhythms.
Right.
And you write that everything from fungi to protozoans, anything, they all have circadian rhythm as part of their life cycle.
Absolutely.
Explain that a little bit more.
So to me, that is, even if I studied this since 25 years, I still find it fascinating, the fact that the same type of rhythms are present from cyanobacteria, which are little bacteria that were there from billion years, all the way to humans through plants, insects, fungi, yeasts, anything. So all life forms have a cycle. How is that possible? Why is it so conserved? So evolutionary has been present all this time, and what is really remarkable is that from I'm not going to go into complicated molecular biology, but the molecules and the structure of the clock itself is also being conserved for most parts. So you have the conceptual and structural way how the clock works has been basically the same from insects all the way to humans. So that tells you how fundamental it is for all forms of biology, right?
So you talk about that circadian clock, and maybe for the purposes of thinking about it now, where does it reside for humans?
Right. So if we talk about mammals, we talk about humans or mice, that's where we work on, mice. For many years, for decades, everybody felt that the clock was localized exclusively in the brain, in an area that is complicated to say, but it's called suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's part of the hypothalamus, where there are about 20,000 neurons. Those neurons have the amazing capacity of oscillating with a 24-hour cycle, no matter what. You actually can take them away, take them actually out from the animal, put them in culture, and they will still oscillate. It's amazing. It's really amazing, the cells.
Yeah.
So for decades, people felt that that was it. That was all the clocks we had, just one in the brain. And that endogenous clock in the brain will be dominating, will be really predominant over the rest of the body and tell all the rest of the body what to do. But a discovery about 20 years ago done in my lab as well as many other colleagues and friends' labs in different systems, we did it in the zebrafish, we found that there are clocks everywhere. There are clocks also in your liver, in your epidermis, in your gut, in your brain, in your muscles. Every single organ, every single tissue has a clock, okay? And further experiments have shown that every single cell has a clock. And the key thing is to be aligned, all those clocks to be somehow aligned to each other. In that sense, the one that is in the brain serves as an orchestra director. It is able to somehow make sure that all the system is pretty much functioning in a coordinated manner.
Yeah. Is there a risk, because this is so encoded in all organisms' DNA, is there a risk that you can too easily extrapolate what happens in zebrafish, for instance, into humans? Talk a little bit about separating those two.
Right, no, that's a very good point. We always need to be careful in using our experimental system and extrapolate that to humans. However, that is the fun part about doing research, which is basically spanning from a system to another and making comparisons, which have, from a physiological and evolutionary point of view, their own interest. But if you really want to know about human health, you need to be able to translate that information to humans. And we've been doing this.
Right.
So that's where things get even more amazing, because we can measure thousands and thousands of genes or thousands and thousands of metabolites and how those oscillate along the day-night cycle in the mouse. And we've been now doing the same type of analysis in human by using the serum, so the blood, or even doing some small biopsies from muscles. And here we go, we find basically the same type of situation. So we can easily extrapolate a lot that we do in the mouse to humans.
So let's do a thought experiment if we can.
Right.
And it's probably crazy.
Sure.
But let's say the day is shortened or lengthened significantly enough such that it affects organisms. At what point, is it an hour, is it several hours, would it affect organisms? And how do you think everything from humans to smaller animals, how would they handle a 30-hour day or something?
Right. So this is basically exactly what's happening to me now, right? Because I flew from California all the way to KAUST.
Right.
So the system, and that is also what is really beautiful about it, is a highly flexible. It's plastic. It's able to accept insults, like, for example, electric light, or, for example, changing time zone on the planet, right? It is plastic because, again, during evolution, it was wired to be able to adapt to changes such as seasons. During the seasons, that's what we do, right? We have longer days in the summer and shorter nights, at least on this hemisphere.
Yeah.
And then that is reversed during winter time with very long nights and shorter days. And yet, our physiology is able to adapt to that very easily. Then in the past 100 years, 150 years, we start really pushing the system by doing a lot of things that we're not supposed to do. Well, electric light, eating your cheeseburger at midnight, or I'm not sure I should say that, but let's say looking at Facebook at 2 in the morning.
That's right.
Right, and that is provoking an amazing insult to our normal physiology. So we are plastic, we are able to adapt, but more we push the system, especially if we do it over and over and over, then we enter discussing the epigenetic aspect, because we start changing that molecular wiring and cause possible pathologies.
So in a way, that plasticity then is contributing or becoming the pathway to harm.
Well, yeah, because plasticity is been, I mean, what we call homeostasis, basically, is our capacity to adapt to changes. But that plasticity itself can turn bad, in brackets, if those insults are repeated. And if they're repeated, is not able to cope with those changes anymore, and thereby becomes basically imposes a new pathways, new circuits, which are not going to be the normal ones, but are going to be towards pathologies, inflammatory responses, and so on.
So there, again, sort of another thought experiment. There are a number of outliers, whether it's people who have to work at night, or whether it's animals that live, above the Arctic Circle and have to endure sunlight for months. How do organisms deal with this? Have you guys
Right. That's another great question. So, first of all, let's remember that we're humans, and humans are highly different from one another. So there's strong individual differences. So that there's a night bird, the guy like me. I go to bed at 1, 2 in the morning every night. It's fine. It's in my normal rhythm, and I cannot assume that everybody else is that way, right? So in fact, I know people that wake up at 6 in the morning. I mean, if I could, I will avoid that. But so we sort of individual differences. So we get to always think, what we like to call the normotype? What is the normality for each single individual? And that should be the one that should be the standard for each individual. And getting away from that specific normotype is what could be a problem. Now, there are, you made the example of people living in the, in Arctic Circle, Finland, or very northern countries. Well, there are pathologies that are associated with being at those latitudes, specifically lack of light. During the winter, very long winter seasons where there is basically almost no light.
Right.
And there's a disruption of the clock itself, or let's say that imposing lack of light is being linked to a number of pathology, such as depression or anxiety. There is, for example, it's called the seasonal affective disorder, which is specific for those latitudes. What they do is to do a simple treatment of bright light with lamps in the middle of the day because they need those photons. So it's almost like our physiology needs the appropriate amount of light, the appropriate amount of darkness, and that cycle needs to be somehow, as much as possible, respected.
There's a whole seemingly industry when you plug circadian rhythm into YouTube or Google. You get a lot of interesting things. But I wonder, what do you think about the propensity of people modern day to want to sort of hack this on some level? So I think your example of light therapy is one, but people wanting to base diet around this, or exercise, or even intellectual work, for instance.
Right. So I am totally with that. I mean, I believe there's a time for specific activities and things to do. Exercise is a great example. Lots of people in the world like to go running early in the morning. It's like, first thing I do is to wake up in the morning and go for a run. Right. Good. I mean, it sounds actually a good idea. And it is. Exercise is great. But people should know that incidence of heart attacks and all cardiac failures is about 5 times higher in the early morning hours. So there's a time that is better for exercise, which is a little later in the morning, not really early in the morning. We're not wired to go running at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. But some people do. I mean, some people maybe are those who want to wake up really early, and they probably be okay. If I do that, I'll be probably in the hospital. So I like to go running at midday. So there's a time, and there's a time for food intake, for nutrition. That's well known as well. If you have that cheeseburger at midday or midnight, is going to have a completely different impact on your physiology. Right. And the simple fact that having food at the wrong time of day can cause obesity and diabetes. The
Right.
same type of calorie, the same type of food, if you have it at a different time of day, could have an amazing impact on yourself.
And does this change by normotype, as you say? So are there
It does, yeah.
night owls like us that can have the cheeseburger and look at Facebook at 1 a.m. and stuff?
Well, if night owls can do things sort of later at night within reason, and is still trying to space the meals at the right time and allow the body to somehow cope with that cheeseburger, not too late, and still have some activity, some physical activity between that cheeseburger and the night time and the sleep time. But we've done experiments that are clearly showing that the food at the wrong time of day will cause a number of pathologies, starting with gain weight and obesity and even diabetes. That's very clear.
The striking one to me was giving exactly the same type of food, just at a different time, caused weight gain as to not. So why is that so striking?
So the question, that's a great question as well. So the point was, we wanted to know, why is that? I mean, what is that we do when you have that cheeseburger at midnight? What's wrong with doing that? And so we embarked into a very large undertaking, trying to understand how our metabolism functions in our body. And we did that in a number of organs and tissues, tried to connect them to each other, and discovered that this circadian network, of metabolism that is all perfectly wired and perfectly connected. So in this circadian organization allows each single organ to be aligned to the others. We've done this by a complex molecular approach called metabolomics, where you can go and look at thousands of metabolites. When you take a liver, for example, and if you measure 1,000 metabolites, we discovered that the liver metabolism oscillates at least half of it fully over day and night. So if you want, the liver has one chunk of its own metabolism that goes and is the same all the time, and then another one that is moving in the daily fashion, ready to cope with things happening to the body. For example, food intake. So if you take the food at the wrong time, and the liver or the gut or the muscles need to now kind of cope with this insult coming, a cheeseburger at the wrong time, the liver is not ready. The liver is activating all those enzymes, all those circuits that are required for digestion already. You've given them now a cheeseburger where they're not ready for it. It's like, what's going on here? So you force the liver, you force the gut, you force the muscle to do an extra work. And that extra work, 1 time is okay, 2 times is okay, 10 times, no good, 100 times, no good. And that's where, the discussion about epigenetics, discussion about changing the basic functionality of each single organ happens.
So then I would think the million-dollar question would then be, why, as night owls, do I want the cheeseburger at 1 a.m.? Why doesn't my body find a way to sort of scare me off of that bad decision?
Well, because there is an additional element, which is the neuroendocrine part of it, that is linked to the hypothalamus. In the hypothalamic nuclei in the brain are the ones interpreting food. And there's a feedback from our gut to the brain. Food gives you pleasure. Is the same pathway, then almost the same pathway, than drugs of abuse will induce. Right. So people are addicted to food, addicted specifically to sugar, but in general to food because it's just like, an addiction. And so what happens is that you want it. Right. It's not that you don't want it, you want it. And the question is like, shall I control myself? Is that the right time? That's when rationality should come in and try to fix things somehow, right?
So there's a battle then going on
That's right.
between my hypothalamus and different sections of my body, including my stomach, saying, give me the cheeseburger.
Right, and it is again some type of epigenetic wiring in the sense that the hypothalamus has been, it's probably expecting more and more food because addicted. And that addiction is based on an epigenetic landscape that's been modified over years because this person has been having the cheeseburger too many times. And so the pleasure feeling is dominating over the single feeling of satiety that is supposed to happen. And it's still in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus tells you, oh, okay, I don't need more food. I'm done. I'm not hungry anymore. And instead, then there's this desire, the pleasure part. Right. How many times we go and eat something while we actually not really hungry? That is a different problem. It's a social problem, which is like this availability of food everywhere, all the time. It's crazy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So that then does lead me to that social question.
Right.
Do you think, since we're getting more cancer prone, more depressed, more obese in many societies, do you think that we're dealing effectively in a social way with our circadian rhythm, or do you think that we're moving in the wrong direction?
Well, I think that the world, not just the Western world, but in Saudi Arabia is the same. Saudi Arabia has one of the highest, degree of obesity as a country in the world, and you wonder why is that, and you wonder can we do something socially to help. Right. So while we've been going the wrong direction for a long time, now there's way more awareness and people are now starting to understand what is the problem and how to try to fix it. And this starts from clinicians. I'm not sure we still can talk about our politicians. Clearly it's not the case in the United States, although in some places, especially in California or the East Coast, things are different. So what can be done? Lots can be done.
Yeah.
In a country like Denmark, for example, is already accepted that women doing a night shift work can be supported by Medicare because that shift work at night increases the risk of breast cancer by about 40%.
Wow.
So,
did you say 40%?
About 40% increase in risk. Wow. Yeah. So this is well known. It's been reported. It's been scientifically proven. But a country like Denmark, I think, is ahead of others. But I know, for example, at UCI, in my university, I discussed with many colleagues and clinicians, and they start to have that awareness. They realize that, especially in our cancer center. So I think this is something that is going to become more and more visible. We got to be careful in trying to convey that information to society. What is wrong about having a commercial in TV at midnight about a cheeseburger? Why we have that? Can we stop that somehow?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand why we need those things. I really don't. And yet they're there, right? Yeah. So there's a lot that can be fixed, that can be done socially, right?
What is speaking of that, what is the future of this area of research? If you had a crystal ball, what is 5 and 10 years from now? What things are we going to be talking about?
I think that what is going to be really exciting and something that's really starting. So I know that in 5-10 years, that's where we're going to be, at least for the human aspect, is really going towards the personalized medicine and precision medicine. The circadian aspect can help a lot, and it's a matter of really investing on one side the clinicians, but also the society, try to understand that doing some metabolomics profiling among people can help a lot, creating some type of identity card of your metabolism, single made for each single person, so personalized for each single fellow. And then that could be easily on your cell phone in terms of information, and then you can, that your cell phone could possibly even tell you Is this the right time to have my cake or my cheeseburger or whatever? Or is this the right time to exercise? If we could get there, I think, well, we'll do two things at the same time. One is to help large groups of society to have a better, much better health, right? And that is a key thing. But also will probably decrease dramatically the cost of Medicare. Because instead to cure, we're going to prevent. That to me is really, we call health science. We don't call pathology science, right? So we want to improve health, not necessarily cure pathologies. Not that that's bad, I mean, we should cure pathologies. But what about trying to avoid them? What about trying to decrease that impact that is huge on society by the Medicare everywhere in the world?
And I guess the captivating thing following on that then would be, is there a best time based on someone's epigenetic profile when to have treatment? Have you found that medical treatment is also based on that?
Right. So there are several colleagues doing working in chronopharmacology, which is, for example, for a number of pathologies, including cancer, when is the best time to do for cancer a chemotherapy, right? All right. So in a study we had published a couple of years ago, we discovered that a tumor that is developed in the lung is going to change the homeostasis and physiology and metabolism in the liver.
Wow.
So if that is the case, and the liver is not the same than a normal liver, when that automatically tells you also that the chemotherapy has to be provided at the time of that new liver that needs to be able to cope with the chemicals coming. We cannot consider that liver like a normal liver. And so that is critical. Lots of fellows and clinicians are starting to appreciate all that approach, So it's going to be important.
Well, this is fascinating stuff, and I don't want to preclude your keynote too much, but I mean, give us a teaser for your keynote.
Absolutely, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, best of luck. That's going to be at 4 p.m. today. Make sure and catch that live on the Facebook channel. Join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. As we have another KAUST Live conversation. Of course, remember to comment, like, and share on all the KAUST social channels using the hashtag WEP2019. And from everyone here at KAUST, thank you so much for watching.